Well, good afternoon to many of you east of the Mississippi, and good after or good morning to those a little bit farther west. My name is Eric Eversole. I'm the president of Hiring Our Heroes, and I am here to kick off Motivational Mondays as part of our virtual career community. As you know, we've done Motivational Mondays now for about 15 weeks, and we really leverage this time to really set the agenda for the week, to talk about things that matter to us, to give us a little motivation, to start seeing things in a light that's a little bit different than maybe what we see on the news, and quite honestly, to really get our heads focused on the mission in front of us, and importantly reflect on what's going on in the larger world. So today, and again, let me thank our sponsor for Motivational Mondays, Toyota. Toyota has been a sponsor for since our beginning at Hiring Our Heroes, and has been an organization that has really helped us accomplish amazing things. And when coronavirus hit and we were able to shift to a digital platform, it was Toyota's support to help make that happen. So a company that's always on the edge of innovation, and really helped us into our transformation into a digital company here in the last couple of months. I'm really honored to have my predecessor to Hiring Our Heroes, the person who started Hiring Our Heroes back in 2011, who was at the time the chief of staff for Tom Donahue, our CEO, and someone who was an innovator in the veteran space, someone who saw an opportunity for companies to step into a breach where there was a tremendous need, an opportunity when we saw unprecedented veteran employment, and to leverage the resources of the chamber to make a difference for veterans and their families across the country. And my guest today is probably needs really no introduction, is Kevin Schmiegel. Kevin is now the CEO of Operational Gratitude. And Kevin, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Eric. It's great to be back talking with folks who appreciate the work that Hiring Our Heroes is doing. I think you'll mention Hiring Our Heroes probably 4 or 5 times while we're talking today. It's always a great source of inspiration for me too. And I love seeing the work that you and your team are doing and the impact that you're making every day. So it's great to be here.
Well, Kevin, it's great to be able to sit down and talk with you like this, and talk about what's going on, but importantly, what you're doing now at Operation Gratitude. So let me actually start there. You took over in 2017 as the CEO of Operation Gratitude. And as soon as you came in, you're a strategic thinker. You really analyzed the space. You analyzed what Operation Gratitude was doing. And can you tell us a little bit? You made some changes. Can you tell us a little bit about the mission of Operation Gratitude, and how is the organization focused on going forward?
Sure, it's a great question. It's funny because the time I interviewed for this job was in October of 2017. I was actually running a smaller nonprofit, you probably know, Eric, called Thanks USA, that does need-based scholarships for military spouses, military kids. And I agreed to do a 30-minute Skype call with the founder of Operation Gratitude, Carolyn Blaszczyk, under the premise that I was giving her 3 names for the role of CEO. And fast forward about 2 hours later, and I agreed to take the job as the CEO of Operation Gratitude. We just made that connection point. At the time I joined in December of 2017, there was a 2-part mission. The first part of that mission was to lift the spirits of our military and first responders around the country and around the world. And the second part of the mission was to allow every American the opportunity to express appreciation through volunteerism and giving back. And what I saw was this incredible foundation. Literally, at the time, about 600,000 volunteers in 2018. And I realized that Operation Gratitude was uniquely positioned to bridge what people have been talking about for a decade, the civilian military divide, and really the larger divide that exists between civilians and service people. So we expanded that term. We created a council called the Bridge Council to help us think through that, bridging the divide through gratitude and engagement. And what we tried to do over the last 2.5 years was go beyond saying thank you for your service, right? Because that is really the start of a conversation. That's the start of a conversation that leads to a meaningful connection, leads to an understanding, leads to empathy, and leads to those bridges that we're looking for. And we had a platform to do that. Our care packages were a vehicle. And what we decided to do, the vision for the organization, was to replicate what Carolyn Blaszczyk built in Los Angeles and spread it across the country. And in the 16 months leading to COVID, we were in 9 cities. We brought together 5,000 volunteers who had never participated in a service project at that scale. They assembled 100,000 care packages. 30,000 went to deployed troops, 30,000 went to recruit graduates in the Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Marine Corps. And 40,000 of these red pouches went to every police officer, firefighter, and EMT in 8 of those 9 cities that day or the day after. I guess the one analogy I can use, when I knew we had gotten to a point as an organization where we were achieving that vision, I saw Jeff Cathy, you know Jeff at Bank of America, down in Tampa, and you've been to Tampa as well as part of Hiring Our Heroes recently. But I got a chance to talk to Jeff, and he said at the end of the conversation, well, this is really enlightening because, 5 years ago, someone asked me to meet with Operation Gratitude, and I said, they just do care packages and they're just in Los Angeles. And that's the difference now. We're across the country doing good work and making more meaningful connections by bringing civilians together with military and first responders.
Well, I mean, when you talk about Operation Gratitude, and it really, I think, leads to this next question quite well, and that's the similarities between Hiring Our Heroes and Operation Gratitude. I mean, I've heard you talk about it, but some of the things that you were talking about really sparked some thoughts in my head as what those similarities were. Hiring Our Heroes, national grassroots organization, you built a very strong foundation, really working with local communities to prop up veteran employment. Bridging the gap, the civilian military divide was one of those cornerstones of our efforts. You talked a little bit about that. And then, it's funny, one of the things that you mentioned was this viewpoint that you really had to work aggressively to overcome. The Operation Gratitude was just care packages. And you're probably not surprised that that's what a lot of people said about Hiring Our Heroes. When I took over we're just hiring events, right? And tell me a little bit about, the lessons learned from Hiring Our Heroes and how does that, shape your viewpoints now, and more importantly, how you as the leader of Operation Gratitude is really working to shape your long-term mission.
Yeah, it's funny because I never really thought, I thought about what's analogous all the time, but I never thought about the analogy you used about just being hiring events or hiring fairs. And you've really taken the organization further with the fellowship program and a lot of the mentoring opportunities and the networking events and the MCs. So, but how many times have we heard that, Eric, right?
Yeah.
And we knew exactly what it was. And I guess that is probably the best analogy. They're not just hiring fairs. They're not just care packages. They are, the success of these programs were based on bringing the community together and building something lasting. The hiring fair was the means to that end. just like the care packages and our assembly days are a means to that end. People can, you know, kibosh that and say they're just this or just that, but look at the results of hiring our heroes over the last 9 years. When we started at the chamber, we had one thing going for us, the huge thing. It was at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, right? The largest business federation in the world. And 3 million businesses and affiliates, and the local chambers, right? Driving that is the fact. If you go to our website, you'll see all the different volunteer activities. Last year alone, we had 1 million volunteers, 1 million people. And to think that Americans across the country.
Kevin, you still there?
Yeah, I'm back on. I don't know what happened there.
I don't know. It's the crazy world of the internet, especially when you have an important call that we were talking about before you even got on.
Yeah.
1 million volunteers. That's what I heard.
So our strength compared to having the chamber and starting hiring our heroes in that incredible organization are our volunteers. 1 million volunteers last year alone. These paracord bracelets, I wear them. We received 300,000 of these bracelets last year. 300,000. Think about knitters and crocheters across the country. 70,000 hand knit and crocheted scarves. 1.1 million handwritten letters of appreciation. Every Halloween for the first 2 weeks of November, we receive 400,000 pounds. 400,000 pounds of Halloween candy. 80,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies in the spring this year. So those two things, right, our foundation are our volunteers. Hiring Our Heroes was the chamber and the local chambers. And those 1 million volunteers help us spread this movement and help it grow. I used to say, and I think this local approach is the same. We said at Hiring Our Heroes, when we folded up the tables and put away the chairs, all the planning that we did going into that hiring fair, it wasn't really about how many veterans got hired at the job fair. It was about those bodies that we formed. The same thing is happening with Operation Gratitude. We have regional people now that are going into communities and organizing, and we plan around an event. And when that event is over, they decide to do it without us, right? That's what we want. That's how you create a movement around solving for employment, unemployment for veterans and military spouses, and around solving for the divide that exists. And that's, I mentioned the Bridge Council before. Our Bridge Council, Bridging the Divide Through Gratitude and Engagement, is exactly the same thing as the VAC and the MCAC. It's exactly the same type of body. It's a community of people who really care about the issue. I think back to the first gala at Hiring Our Heroes. We've come together, you see it. It's a community of people who care about veterans and spouses getting good jobs and good careers. You have fun there. It's like you all know each other. That's exactly what we're trying to do with the Bridge Council. Bring people who care, passionate advocates about bridging divides and bringing communities together.
Yeah. Well, and and I, this, we'll go a little bit off script here for a second. For me, we did Hiring Fence in 2011 because that's what the space needed us to do more so than anything. I mean, we were trying to be good community partners by doing what the chamber does incredibly well, which is organize these national grassroots campaigns to impact people in local communities. And that's what we did really well. But as the space evolved, so did, the tactics that we use to help, veterans get jobs and military spouses get jobs. So, at the end of the day, and I know that from your perspective with Operation Gratitude, it's the same for you, which is how do you leverage what you're good at and how do you bridge that relationship to ultimately help the mission and drive success?
Yeah, it's exactly the same, which is why I keep on telling people that are following what we're doing about the successes of Hiring Our Heroes and even how you evolved and the organization and your team evolved to meet the changing environment. I mean, that's one of the most important things you have to do when you're running a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's what's that quote by General Shinseki? If you don't like change, you'll like irrelevancy even less. And it
Exactly.
seems like we're constantly in change mode, but that's because we're analyzing the space and delivering what the community needs. And to me, that's helped us deal, and I'm sure it's the same with you. It's helped us, very rapidly uh, change our tactics in light of COVID-19.
Exactly.
Um, let me, under your leadership and really your kind of mission focused effort, you as an organization, Operation Gratitude as an organization has grown significantly. And I remember one of those conversations that we had about our corporate fellowship program and how you all could get involved in that because you were really looking to employ veterans and military spouses in your mission. Can you talk a little bit about your growth over the last 2.5, 3 years, and how important are your veteran and military spouse employees to that growth and to achieving your mission?
Well, I love to hire veterans and military spouses. It's kind of practicing what we preached at Hiring Our Heroes for years. And I remember that conversation too, because we actually hired a military spouse fellow who's a C-suite kind of EA. She's done an amazing job without much experience. She's also writing grants for us, a Navy spouse named Monica Shea. But when I started in the organization, and just a couple months in February of 2018, because we did have one part-time military spouse, we had 13 employees. I was the only veteran and she was the only part-time spouse. Today we have 32 employees. So we've grown significantly, and 14 of the 19 people, new people, are veterans or military spouses, which is pretty significant. I mean, they represent close to almost half the organization, 40% of the organization. And I think it was important for us because the spouses, the veterans, the caregivers I hired live and breathe the challenges of the communities they represent, the programs that they lead. And we know what the impact that can make. I think they culturally changed the organization. I think they've helped us build a team of believers, an unstoppable team, a resilient team, a team that can adapt and evolve and overcome just about any circumstance, to include COVID-19. But I also think that they embraced our mission statement in a way that made people who were not veterans or military spouses understand what I meant when I first started, when I said this organization is uniquely positioned to bridge the civilian military and larger civilian service divide. People didn't know what I was talking about, but we've done that even on our own team. We've created a better understanding about our military, about our first responders, about service, and that's helped us be more effective as an organization. I think we've created an environment. We want to be known as a nonprofit that believes in empathy and not sympathy and bridging the divide, and looking at veterans, military spouses, service members, wounded heroes, and caregivers as strong and resilient people who deserve support and need support, but don't need sympathy or pity. They need people to understand what they're going through so they can be better supported. And bringing on 14 veterans and military spouses in a little over 2 years has been the best thing that I've done as the CEO. And we actually had a veteran who went through the corporate fellowship program on the vet side. We actually didn't hire him, but he got a job with Amazon in Seattle. So lots of great stories, and we are aggressively looking for more fellows with HOH right now. So I think we're looking at a spouse fellow, a vet fellow, and one of your Salesforce fellows too. So
Excellent. Well, we love to hear that. We understand the impact of the fellowship program, and really, really excited to have you participate. And I may be, how's my sound, Kevin? Is it good, bad? Okay. Let me, let's talk a little bit about the civilian military divide, because it's an issue that I've been pounding the desk on for now 7 years about the civilian military divide. I know, before me, you were pounding that desk at Hiring Our Heroes. You're still, continuing to pound that desk. Um, Sometimes I think we've made some progress, and other times I scratch my head and wonder whether we've done enough in this space. But I would love to get your perspective on the civilian military divide, what progress we've made, and maybe some examples where you really start to see where perhaps we're turning that corner.
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that this will only be solved with actions. I think there's a lot of great articles that have been written, a lot of great speeches, a lot of great conferences held about this topic. And I really believe that actions in communities will solve for it. I think Hiring Our Heroes has done that in the corporate world. I think veterans ERGs are doing that. But for Operation Gratitude, I told you about those 9 cities, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I mean, I've seen people dancing, singing, laughing, people of every race, color, creed, every belief, every viewpoint, politics aside, come together in communities and gather around giving back and making a difference. So those 9 cities included San Antonio, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Nashville, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, San Diego. And what we saw in those communities was something that can only be imagined if you're there. And what we decided to do, I said this before, in 8 of those 9 cities, we actually brought military families in from adjacent communities to assemble care packages for some of the first responders, those red pouches that I showed you earlier. If the best way to probably describe this, so I'm not talking the whole time, is a video. So we actually had an event in Washington, D.C. That was the 9th city. That was back in January of 2019. I think your team is going to cue it up. That was a great example. And you actually had, Mona was there and Liz O'Brien was there too, to participate as volunteers. So I don't know if your team can call up the video real quick and show the folks that are viewing what it looked like.
Okay, here we go.
I'm Emily Pearman. I'm the Director of Corporate Volunteerism, and I am from Ashburn, Virginia.
And a Marine
Today
spout.
we are bringing out hundreds of volunteers from the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. We will be stuffing 25,000 care pouches that will then be directly delivered to hundreds, if thousands of our DC, Maryland, and Virginia first responders, as well as being sent off for new recruit graduations and other first responders around the country.
I'm Pete Newsham. I'm the Chief of Police here in Washington, D.C. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank Operation Gratitude for holding this event, for thinking about our first responders, caring about our police officers, our firefighters, our men and women in the military. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, I think the video does speak for itself. You could see there was a school from Prince George's County, Bishop McNamara High School, the young police cadets, and just 400 people getting together to get back. And while they're walking the lines, they're talking and having conversations and starting that meaningful connection. And then actually having the police chief and the fire chief, the head of the DC National Guard, General Walker, speak, talk about service, talk about what it meant. Those things mean a lot. This is not just expressing gratitude to them. It was a chance for them to express gratitude to the volunteers, right? And I'm not saying, I'm not getting caught in the same trap as saying thank you is a way to bridge the divide solely, but it is the start.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how much can be accomplished if if people can sit down and just have a conversation with each other without a bunch of pretenses, but instead focused on just who they are as individuals and what they stand for and why they care about what they do. It's really remarkable to see that. I know that organizationally, Operation Gratitude is able to really help bridge the divide by bringing together large groups of people together to build these care packages, to talk with each other, to get to know each other as people, to share their passions and their convictions together. How has COVID-19 impacted that ability on large gatherings for you all? I mean, obviously, it has been tougher, I'm sure. How have you worked to help overcome that challenge?
That's probably the toughest thing that I faced as a nonprofit leader. I remember 14 weeks ago when the article appeared in the LA Times about California issuing the stay-at-home order. And I called our COO, who's another Marine veteran, served for 27 years, Paul Cuccinata. At Thursday night, it was like 10 o'clock, and we woke up early the next morning because neither one of us could sleep. But we were actually talking about shutting down operations, furloughing our employees, and just taking a pause with COVID. But we talked it through, and we did, like you said, we evolved, right? We came up with 2 pillars, and we were probably the most successful. We have been the most successful 3 months in the organization's history in terms of all different metrics that we track. The most important one being the number of heroes that we impacted and the number of volunteers we engaged with. So the first thing that we did was we created a campaign called Virtual Volunteerism with that hashtag. And we went to companies who are now facing remote work, facing their kids being at home from school, facing being with a working spouse like Eric, and like I know. And we reached out to them. We worked with 86 of the Fortune 100 companies over the last 5 years in service projects. We asked them to do it at home. So they organized service projects where people could join on Zoom calls. They made bracelets, they wrote letters. We asked all of the 17,000 community-based groups that we work with, schools and churches and Boy Scout troops and Kiwanis clubs and National Charity League chapters, to do the same thing. Engage with your students, engage with your members, engage with your athletes if you're a coach, and do those service projects at home. And then we engaged with our individual volunteers and we asked them to do the same. And we helped, I think, those volunteers during a really challenging time. They were anxious, they needed a sense of purpose, and that took off. And the second thing that we did is we sent jumbo care packages on pallets, basically bulk deliveries. So we can't bring volunteers together to make the boxes or the red pouches that I showed you, but we can still receive items and ship them with our small team. Our small and mighty team of 32 has delivered more than 4 million items with a wholesale value of more than $5 million to 220 different locations in 14 weeks, impacting 250,000 frontline responders, doctors and nurses in hospitals and medical clinics, police officers, firefighters, and EMTs at departments, and National Guard units in more than 20 states now. So, I mean, I couldn't be prouder of our team, but it really was just a question of thinking about what we do as an organization and making some simple changes.
Yeah, one of those partners that we share, Prudential, I know, and Jim Beamister, who's the leader of their veterans effort up there, has been actively engaged with you all on helping to leverage some digital technology and other efforts. Can you talk a little bit about Prudential's effort to help support you all during COVID-19?
Yeah, so Prudential is a great example because last year they did events where they made 3,000 of these at 6 different locations. They couldn't bring their employees together, so they did a massive letter writing campaign across their enterprise. And then for COVID-19, as part of that 250,000 number, Jim Beamister called in every relationship that he had in Newark, and we worked with the emergency response organization, the department that kind of helps first responders in the hospitals and everyone, frontline workers in Newark. And we delivered, you can see the numbers there, 146,000 individual items and handwritten letters to 15,600 frontline responders in 6 hospitals in the police and fire department. And that was all because of Prudential. Jim got the mayor there. We obviously were engaged with the hospitals, the doctors and nurses. You can see those great pictures. We say masks can't hide smiles, but Jim was actually on site. He was the spokesperson for us. And he also joined a coalition of other companies. We formed a coalition of 7 companies to include Prudential and Starbucks as well, and a few others like Mars Wrigley. Starbucks and Mars Wrigley provide the product, but also supporting the communities where they have a big footprint as well, like Prudential. So,
great company. Jim's a great leader. Obviously, we're all watching the news, and we're seeing, what's happening across the country with some spikes in COVID-19, really, in Florida, in Texas, and Houston, in California, LA. We're in this for the long haul, like I know you all are. What are your plans as we continue to battle COVID, as we continue to place stress on our hospitals? I saw a story that I think it was out of Houston or San Antonio, that all the ICU beds are filling up in a lot of the Texas hospitals. We're in this for the long haul. So, Kevin, what are your plans from Operation Gratitude to make sure that these frontline responders get the recognition they deserve, and how do we continue to support them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, first of all, I think everyone on the call is probably exhausted and frustrated with what's going on. And to put that in perspective, imagine if you're a doctor or nurse and you're seeing a spike in a community that you thought had under control, or in the case of Houston, seeing a spike that you never imagined in the first few months. And now it's analogous to really what happened in New York. We issued a press release last week, and even 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how we're going to ramp this down and start bringing people together. That press release talked about the 250,000, but we're doing a second wave of COVID-19 relief efforts. And we've made a commitment, if the number's 500,000 or the number's 1 million, we'll find a way to support. We're even going back to some of the communities, the hospitals and that have been hardest hit a second time, and just going to send them these bracelets as a sign of appreciation. And the reason I know we can do this, Eric, is this map right here. The reason I know that we can provide that support no matter what happens, and even this goes to the end of the year, is we have 1 million volunteers. Like, this heat map shows where those volunteers are. And those little blue dots over those heat maps show where we've done deliveries. And I talked about 400,000 pounds of candy. I talked about these 300,000 bracelets. If we put a call to action out to the American public and say, we need your support, they will respond. I mean, and it's also great to have companies like Starbucks and Mars Wrigley that will provide that support too. But I know that if they can't, that the American public will. And there are literally people the day after Halloween, they'll go to a CVS, they'll go to a supermarket, and they will buy 10 pounds of candy to send it to us. And they probably spend more money on the shipping than they did on the candy, because they want those who serve to know that there are people who support them. So it's a great feeling to know that we have that type of support and that we can make those types of statements. And I wouldn't do it if we just had corporate support. We need everyday Americans to support it as well.
Yeah, it speaks volumes as to the will of the American people, and how generous and caring they are. And we don't always see that in the nightly news. I mean, unfortunately, we're in a news cycle where there is, a lot of tragedy going on. We've certainly seen that in light of the tragic death of George Floyd and many, many others. It has created a lot of tension in our communities between police forces and the African American communities and systemic racism that exists in this country. These are tough issues and ones that aren't going to be solved overnight, and they're certainly not going to be solved by one organization. It's probably the $1 million question for you, Kevin. I mean, how does your organization help address some of that divide and some of the tension that now exists between the communities of color and the police force?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think before everyone joined the call and you and I were just talking, it's something that's weighed on me since the tragic death of George Floyd, and trying to do things absolutely perfectly, because I think as an organization and as the CEO of this organization, I want to make sure that we are in a position to help. And if we say something that's going to offend anyone in this environment right now, that may hurt our chances of bridging divides. Because I've seen it, and I'm a very action-oriented person. I want to go out and help right now. But we made a decision as an organization to actively listen, to really double down on the relationships that we have and call them to bear. So we took the Bridge Council and we created these roundtables quietly, and we expanded them out. And just 3 weeks ago, we did it here in DC, and we had the senior leadership from our Bridge Council, but we also called on police chiefs from Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, LA, and DC to be on that call too. We had the DC Mayor's office. We had 7 people as part of the DC Mayor's office on that call too. And we had some incredible findings and things that really opened my eyes, because I'm not an expert on policing. I'm not an expert on issues of racial injustice. And I have to be careful as the CEO of an organization that's very action-oriented, again, to make sure that we're well-informed so that we can help. That's all I want to do right now. So despite my desire to get out and help, I've pulled back from that, and we've pulled back from that. We're still doing deliveries to police departments. We're still doing deliveries to fire departments and hospitals and National Guard units. We will not stop because they can't stop. And we need to show that we respect the officers, the good officers who are out there that are serving with honor, courage, and commitment, that we do support them and will continue to support them because we want to be in a position to help. I think we know now that we have to broaden our perspectives. We have to invite people in. So one of the recommendations was every person in the Bridge Council who arguably is from the military, is a veteran, has an affinity for military and first responders, we've got to ask them to ask people that don't have an affinity or an affiliation with our military and first responders. We're gonna broaden the Bridge Council to include people of diverse viewpoints, and we're gonna really make conversations uncomfortable. And we also realize that every community is different and one solution will not fit all. And we've decided that we're gonna form sub-councils, right, at the local level. And this goes right back to the first question or the first couple of questions about analogies with hiring our heroes. We are going to be in 5 or 6 cities as people are ready, when the timing is right. DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Seattle, and Newark. Because we have relationships there, Operation Gratitude representatives, the corporate representatives that are on the Bridge Councils, the Prudentials, the Starbucks in their communities, they'll call on senior people from civic groups, leaders in the community. And we will broaden those sub-councils, and we'll look 8 weeks out. We'll plan an assembly day for deployed troops or veterans, doing care packages for service members who are overseas or for our veterans here at home who need our help. everyone will want to come together for that. And we'll plan it and we'll say, hey, this isn't just about the care packages. How are we going to bring the community together? How can we build on this? What's going to be next? You know, how can we open the dialogue up through this service project where we're planning for 8 weeks? And maybe after that service project, Eric, we'll see the same thing that we saw at Hiring Our Heroes when we folded the tables up and put away the chairs. They say, hey, Kevin, we love what Operation Gratitude does, but we're doing 5 events a year now with this group that came together. We're going to continue to engage again and again and again and build enduring relationships in those communities where divides are bridged. That's the only way I see forward. But right now, we realize it's not the perfect time to bring those councils together to start talking about events, not only because of what happened in Minneapolis, what's happening in communities across the country, but also because of COVID and the realities that we're not going to be able to bring big groups together. We are going to look at specific communities and do smaller events, like here in DC, we're planning something for the end of the month. So I think we have a plan, and I think the most important thing, and I recommend this for everyone, it's my own, this is my personal opinion, that listening right now is action, right? It is important not to get mired down in some of the conversations that are happening and give opinions on things that people don't know anything about. And people should be thinking about unity and bridging divides more than causing those divides.
It's, you know, I think we were both on a conversation a couple of weeks ago, maybe three weeks ago, when you know, the horrible facts around the George Floyd tragedy and some of the racial injustice was unfolding. And part of that conversation, what I heard, at least from one nonprofit and their PR firm, was, you know, just don't say anything. Just, you know, take a step back. And it seems to me that that's not necessarily the right course of action either. You have to, we have to talk about this. We have to listen, and we have to find a way to bridge that divide.
Yeah, I agree. I think people who listen will be better informed, and they'll be able to help. I mean, that if people think of it that way, and you can put yourself in a position where you're involved in a way that is helpful, then you've done everything you can.
Yeah. Let's talk about, you know, military families, because, you know, service members, family members, I mean, that's really where you all started as an organization. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, from your perspective, where are we now, I guess nearly 20 years into conflict? You know, where are we from a need perspective? I mean, how are military families doing? You know, what are their needs? How can we help them as a country?
Yeah, I think I've used this term a lot, and I don't think it's hyperbole. I think the support organizations like Hiring Our Heroes and Operation Gratitude and all the other nonprofits in the space that we all know, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Blue Star Families, TAPS, Team Rubicon, like they're serving great purposes, and I really believe our support is more important than ever. I think from our perspective, military families and deployed service members have been at this for 19 years, and they need to know that America will continue to support them. And what we've done as an organization in the middle of COVID-19 is we've quietly supported our deployed service members and military families. We delivered 1,000 care packages to sailors that were quarantined in Guam from the Teddy Roosevelt. We delivered 2,000 care packages to soldiers who were quarantined in Korea since February 19. We forged a partnership with the American Red Cross in Europe, where we sent out 10,000 care packages on Friday to service members deployed in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. And we've delivered more than 3,000 of our stuffed bears. I don't know if I have one now. I do. These battalion buddies to children of deployed troops. I mean, think about what's going on, Eric. In the middle of, we just talked about the longest war in our nation's history. Think about COVID-19. Like 3 months ago, you know what it's like. You hear from service members all the time. Think about what's going on in the mind of the service member and their family in April when they hear that their deployments are going to be extended and they don't know when they're coming home. I mean, we must do something. And we got an email from a young mom in Korea who received one of those 2,000 care packages. She was deployed for a year in April. When she found out that she would be gone for another 3 months for a 15-month deployment, leaving her husband, who's a 21-year soldier as well, getting ready to retire. And you know this as a parent of young girls, a child who is just turning 2 years old. Imagine the strength and courage and resolve that she had to have. She sent us this beautiful picture with a big old smile on her face. That's strength, that's courage. And we need to double, triple, quadruple down on our efforts to support deployed troops, which is why we as an organization we had 5,000 requests in our system. We put our system on hold. And after we got that email, you know what it's like. We're just doing it. And we are going to get together in the DC Armory here from July 23rd to July 30th, and we're going to put together 5,000 care packages.
Yeah, we're, I see it each and every day. I know you see it, but the resilience and the strength of our service members and their families are second to none in this country. And that's not to diminish the strength of everyday American families, but to your point, I mean, we're talking about a group of folks who've now been in a hamster wheel when it comes to conflict overseas for nearly 20 years. On a moment's notice, they could be deployed for anywhere from 6 months to a year, leaving their families behind. Military spouses have faced 20, 25% unemployment since forever, as far as we can tell, and yet they still show up every day to work, and they show up and to the best of their abilities put a smile on their face. And we're seeing it kind of an unprecedented growth in our services as service members are transitioning out. They thought that they were going to, 3 months ago, they thought that they would be getting out. Great time. The economy was good. They'd have no trouble finding a job, and they're facing a much different reality right now. But, their strength and their resolve, is helping them, find those opportunities, and we're here to support them. We're seeing good results on that front, but I can't imagine, to your point of being gone after 12 months and each day passing by, knowing that you're going to be going home after 12 months and then get that letter saying, actually it's going to be 3 more months. Hit the reset button.
It's an unbelievable wait. And I think for the service member, they're mostly concerned about their families, right? And that's why I'm so passionate about the program that we have for young military kids, having said goodbye to my own boys for numerous deployments and being away from them 1,000 nights where I didn't get them to tuck them into bed. Being able to support them is just as important. I think I saw a little note from Cheryl Endress and commenting, she sent a request through Facebook for her daughter who's deployed, and Operation Gratitude met that request for her and her daughter's team. But it's when I see Cheryl write a note like that, I always think of Mike Endress, right? And the beautiful person he was. And the first kind of convening that I ever went to, Eric, Mike Endress was there. I'm not going to say the word that he used, but you'll get the spirit of it, because he said around the table, and we were talking about bridging the divide and getting vets jobs, but just talking about the community, the military and veteran nonprofit community as a whole. And he said, this stuff is all great, but we need people who get stuff done. I use the word stuff intentionally. And that's what this is about. It's about getting stuff done. And that's what we do as an organization. That's clearly what Hiring Our Heroes does and what your team does every day. And that's why I'm so proud that, you know, we're on this call together, right? It's being your predecessor and watching all the great things the organization has done since I left at Hiring Our Heroes and the impact that it's made, and actually getting to be a part of it too by hiring, you know, fellows and being part of that program too. It's been amazing. I really appreciate you two joining this collective that's up on the screen called Pay It Forward. I think what we would love for everyone on the call to do is to get involved with Christmas in July. And the fact that Hiring Our Heroes joins the Dole Foundation and Team Red, White, and Blue, United Through Reading and NMFA, is a testament to your leadership. I promise the letters that people write as part of Christmas in July will go in care packages to thousands and thousands of deployed service members, just like Cheryl's daughter. You know, just like that young sergeant in the Army, the young mom who's facing right now her 15-month and probably looking forward to the end of July. So everyone is welcome. And, you know, if you're able to share with veterans groups, right, if you're able to share with them too, the ERGs that you work with, I think they'll get involved too. I think it's they want to pay it forward, and they know exactly what that mom is going through right now.
Well, we're honored to be a part of Pay It Forward and to help support your mission in any way we can. I think we got just a couple of minutes for questions if you're game, Kevin.
Sure.
If anybody does have questions, there is at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A function. If you would type in the question there, we'll give it a couple of minutes to populate. But you know, I would encourage anyone who's listening, and for the hundreds of people who will see this at a later date, please go to operationgratitude.com /payitforward/Christmas in July. See how you can get involved either with that campaign or future campaigns. You know, as anybody who knows Kevin, you know, the mission is going to continue to evolve to meet the ever-changing needs. So to keep this thing evergreen, go to operationgratitude.com and find out how you can volunteer. We do have a question. Let me open that up. From our good friend Cheryl Endress, what's your greatest need right now, Kevin?
You know, I think the handwritten letters is our greatest need. We've been really mindful as well not to ask individual supporters out there for funding right now, given the strain that families are under. So I can tell you that a handwritten letter is the most cherished item in a care package. Every day I wake up, I get emails from deployed troops, and without exception, they mention the letters. To get that type of morale boost from a complete stranger has been, in my time, in my 2.5 years, the most meaningful thing that a volunteer can do for a service member, for a frontline responder right now. The letters that we're getting back from doctors and nurses who describe their emergency rooms as battlefields and are happy to talk to and work with an organization led by veterans and military spouses, because we understand what they mean when they say battlefield, right? We understand those indescribable positions. We understand that they have to go back in the fight for the second wave. We understand that even when this is all over, they still have to report for duty. Like, we get that. So Cheryl, it's a great question for anyone. If you want to touch someone's life, you know, sit down and write a heartfelt letter, starting with saying thank you and just having a conversation about who you are and why you wrote the letter and why you are so grateful for that individual service and what it means to you as an American.
Thanks, Kevin. One other quick question. We got just about a minute and a half here. If you're if you're a key stakeholder or community partner, how does someone get involved in the Bridge Council?
All they have to do is contact me. As you know, with the VAC and MCAC, it's kind of our core duty, Eric, to build that community of believers and advocates and people who want to make a difference. You do that with the VAC and MCAC and with your co-chairs. So anyone that's interested should just email me directly at kevin@operationgratitude.com.
Great. Well, thanks, Kevin, and thanks again for joining us today. Special thanks to Toyota for hosting today's Motivational Monday. You know, it's always great to catch up with you and hear about the great things you're doing and what Operation Gratitude is doing. We're 100% supportive of what you all do and really honored to be able to work with you to touch people's lives who are making so many sacrifices across the country, regardless of what type of uniform they wear. So thanks for your support, Kevin. Be well and take care.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.